Getting her first Bitcoin. There are several ways Alice can acquire Bitcoin. She can exchange some of her national currency at a cryptocurrency exchange. She can buy some from a friend or an acquaintance from a Bitcoin meetup in exchange for cash. She can find a Bitcoin ATM in her area, which acts as a vending machine selling Bitcoin for cash. She can offer her skills or a product she sells and accepts Bitcoin as payment. She can ask her employer or clients to pay her in Bitcoin. All of these methods have varying degrees of difficulty, and many will involve paying a fee. Some financial institutions will also require Alice to provide identification documents to comply with local banking regulations/anti-money laundering practices, a process which is known as Know Your Customer (KYC). However, with all these methods, Alice will be able to receive Bitcoin. Tip: One of the advantages of Bitcoin over other payment systems is that when used correctly, it affords users much more privacy. Acquiring, holding, and spending Bitcoin does not require you to divulge sensitive and personally identifiable information to third parties. However, where Bitcoin touches traditional systems, such as currency exchanges, national and international regulations often apply. In order to exchange Bitcoin for your national currency, you will often be required to provide proof of identity and banking information. Users should be aware that once a Bitcoin address is attached to an identity, all associated Bitcoin transactions are also easy to identify and track. This is one reason many users choose to maintain dedicated exchange accounts unlinked to their wallets. Alice was introduced to Bitcoin by a friend, so she has an easy way to acquire her first Bitcoin. Next, we will look at how she buys Bitcoin from her friend Joe and how Joe sends the Bitcoin to her wallet. Finding the current price of Bitcoin. Before Alice can buy Bitcoin from Joe, they have to agree on the exchange rate between Bitcoin and US dollars. This brings up a common question for those new to Bitcoin. Who sets the Bitcoin price? The short answer is that the price is set by markets. Bitcoin, like most other currencies, has a floating exchange rate. That means that the value of Bitcoin vis-a-vis any other currency fluctuates according to supply and demand in the various markets where it is traded. For example, the price of Bitcoin in US dollars is calculated in each market based on the most recent trade of Bitcoin and US dollars. As such, the price tends to fluctuate minutely several times per second. A pricing service will aggregate the prices from several markets and calculate a volume-weighted average representing the broad market exchange rate of a currency pair, for example, BTC/USD. There are hundreds of applications and websites that can provide the current market rate. Here are some of the most popular. Bitcoin Average, a site that provides a simple view of the volume-weighted average for each currency. CoinCap, a service listing the market capitalization and exchange rates of hundreds of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. Chicago Mercantile Exchange Bitcoin Reference Rate, a reference rate that can be used for institutional and contractual reference, provided as part of investment data feeds by the CME. In addition to these various sites and applications, most Bitcoin wallets will automatically convert amounts between Bitcoin and other currencies. Joe will use his wallet to convert the price automatically before sending Bitcoin to Alice. Sending and receiving Bitcoin. Alice has decided to exchange 10 US dollars for Bitcoin so as not to risk too much money on this new technology. She gives Joe $10 in cash, opens her Blue Wallet mobile wallet application, and selects Receive. This displays a QR code with Alice's first Bitcoin address. Joe then selects Send on his Blue Wallet smartphone wallet and is presented with a screen containing the following inputs. 1. The amount to send in Bitcoin or his local currency. 2. A destination Bitcoin address. 3. A transaction note. 4. a transaction fee. In the input field for the Bitcoin address, there is a small scan button. This allows Joe to scan the QR code with his smartphone camera so that he doesn't have to type in Alice's Bitcoin address, which is quite long and difficult to type. Joe taps the scan button and it activates the smartphone camera, scanning the QR code displayed on Alice's smartphone. Joe now has Alice's Bitcoin address set as the recipient. Joe enters the amount as $10 and his wallet converts it by accessing the most recent exchange rate from an online service. The exchange rate at the time is $100 per Bitcoin, so $10 is worth 0.1 Bitcoin, or 100 millibitcoin, as shown in the screenshot from Joe's wallet. In the transaction note input, Joe enters Alice. He can use this field to add some information regarding his transaction for future reference. This function is for his record keeping only. The transaction note will be stored in his wallet and only Joe will be able to see it. It will not be sent to Alice nor stored on the blockchain. He also selects a transaction fee for his transaction. The higher the transaction fee, the faster his transaction will be confirmed, i.e. included in a block by a miner. He selects the minimum transaction fee possible at that time, 0 satoshis per byte. Tip: the price of Bitcoin has changed a lot over time, and an incredible amount since the first edition of this book was written. As of March 2021, a person would need approximately $54,000 to purchase one whole Bitcoin. Many examples in this book reference real-life past transactions, when the price of Bitcoin was much lower and transactions with 0 fees were still possible. Think about how generous of a friend Joe would have been if he had made the same agreement with Alice today. Using Blue Wallet, Joe carefully checks to make sure he has entered the correct amount, because he is about to transmit money and mistakes are irreversible. For simplicity's sake, we will assume that Joe does not pay any transaction fees. The purpose and setting of transaction fees are covered in subsequent chapters. After double-checking the address and amount, he presses Send to transmit the transaction. Joe's mobile Bitcoin wallet constructs a transaction that assigns 0.1 BTC to the address provided by Alice, sourcing the funds from Joe's wallet and signing the transaction with Joe's private keys. This tells the Bitcoin network that Joe has authorized a transfer of value to Alice's new address. As the transaction is transmitted via the peer-to-peer protocol, it quickly propagates across the Bitcoin network. In less than a second, most of the well-connected nodes in the network receive the transaction and see Alice's address for the first time. Meanwhile, Alice's wallet is constantly listening to published transactions on the Bitcoin network, looking for any that match the addresses it contains. A few seconds after Joe's wallet transmits the transaction, Alice's wallet will indicate that it is receiving 0.1 BTC. Tip: each Bitcoin can be subdivided into 100 million units, each called a Satoshi. Named for Bitcoin's creator, the Satoshi is the smallest unit of Bitcoin. Confirmations. At first, Alice's wallet will show the transaction from Joe as unconfirmed. This means that the transaction has been propagated to the network, but has not yet been recorded in the Bitcoin transaction ledger, known as the blockchain. To be confirmed, a transaction must be included in a block and added to the blockchain, which happens every 10 minutes on average. In traditional financial terms, this is known as clearing. This book will cover in detail the propagation, validation, and clearing of Bitcoin transactions. Alice is now the proud owner of 0.1 BTC that she can spend. In the next chapter, we will look at her first purchase with Bitcoin and examine the underlying transaction and propagation technologies in more detail.